have now.
Welcome to episode 8.
We're not wearing pants.
That's for you to find out. This is episode 8. This is the culmination of the entire Bite Down Hard album. And today we're going to look at a song, Lucifer's Lament is the full title, but we've always referred to it as Lucifer. So I guess right off the top, I'm going to ask you, let's set off down that trail of Lucifer.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing it. I haven't heard it in about 20 years. But one of my great thrills was always listening to music, pre-recorded music, in a basement or in a living room, and listening to these beautiful thematic compositions, and just sort of sitting there. And it reminds me of...
Okay. You want me to change?
No, I think you should.
Okay, you go ahead.
So it reminds me of...
Explain the masks later.
So it reminds me of listening to many tracks in my basement, and this is part of the thrill of recording music. I think when I first...
Oh no! There goes Jeremy. This is going to be a long episode. There we go. All right, where were we? So I'm sorry, you were in your basement listening, listening for those sort of musical environments.
Okay, so we're talking about... So sort of the stimuli, non-visual stimuli. So, and even began listening to old radio shows on CFRA at night when you're by yourself. And they would play these stuff from the 30s and 40s, these radio shows.
Okay, I got to okay, we got to stop this. We got to get through this episode.
Well, you want me to...
We got a better one later. All right, so
it's just what the mind can do and where it takes you when you listen to an oral composition, whether it be an old radio play, a horror show. I remember being spooked out of my mind just late at night in the dark listening to these old radio shows, and some of them were just the scream of a girl and stuff like that, and you wouldn't know what was behind the door as soon as she opened it up, and what you could do with your mind and stuff like that. So even growing up, I remember I had these sort of extra special experiences. I remember going to Toronto a couple times when I was really young, and at the Royal Ontario Museum they had a planetarium there. And I remember going there. Have you ever been to a planetarium before? So I remember a couple of real sort of seminal experiences when I was really young. And they would show sort of space, like the whole half dome, and you were in these reclined chairs, and it was the whole sort of spacing. And I remember one time, it was Tangerine Dream was the band that did the backing soundtrack. And I just remember just sort of being immersed. And now the stimuli back then was just sort of stars and stuff. So it was very sort of a simple black on white thing and sparkly stuff. But it really sort of goes with that sort of space motif. I've always felt a lot of times lying in bed that... we're all going to be stardust. We're all going to be star travelers, and I always think I'm just sort of, I am floating through the cosmos right now. We're all sort of floating. We're on a small planet, but be back as sort of in the cosmos and stuff like that. So there was that sort of experience listening to these beautiful sort of, and Tangerine Dream, essentially, it wasn't all music. It was just sort of... back then, it was like the early birth of synthesizers and stuff like that. So it was all these sort of soundscapes.
Envelope filters.
Yeah.
Long, drawn out. It was like 2001. Everything's long and drawn out.
Yeah. And you take
like
the next...
Brian Eno would do music for airports and stuff.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, and you sort of take the next step. So I remember sitting in my basement listening to Kraftwerk, Trans-Europe Express.
I love that.
These 10-minute things where it would just sort of take you somewhere else, or... Listening to Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, obviously, and stuff like that. So, obviously, like a lot of Beatles stuff. So it was always these sort of tripped out, thematic sort of things that I was really influenced by. And it wasn't only music, but it was also all those sort of weird sounds and stuff like that. And that was even before 5-to-1. So I loved sort of the stereo thing of flipping stuff around. It was always good to listen to that in headphones. And so that's where that sort of I knew when I was going to do like an album. I don't know whether it was. I think as soon as I started to experience some of the ways that we could duplicate sounds and use some of your sound modules and stuff like that, this song specific, I think there was one sort of seagull type of sound patch. I think it was called Seagulls. Is that right? Does that sound familiar to you?
It had to be, because it was exactly that.
Yeah, so...
Because we had that S10 sampler, and we would sample some sounds, but there were already sounds on some of the discs we would buy, and they didn't have any real rhyme or reason.
Yeah, and especially with the MIDI thing, with the click track, you could start to generate or pulse these sounds, and then through reverbs and stuff like that. I mean, the combinations were endless, and it was always just neat to discover the way different sounds sort of went on top of each other.
And just so everybody's clear on this was like the early 90s. There was no going to the internet and going sound effects, seagulls, sound effects. It was basically create it yourself, Foley it in. Now, we had a collection of CD sound effects, but we usually preferred to Foley in our own sound where possible, because it was much more fun too. We love the organic thing of making sounds ourselves. Yeah,
and I think we were excited by the new technology that was presented to us, and how easy it was to start putting sounds that you find in your life and in the ether, that you could easily sort of get them and bring them onto onto the music you were playing, stuff like that. And so I remember that, and I don't remember ever sort of saying we have to do a 10-minute song, but I think that idea was always just sort of like this wasn't sort of going to be the how did we end up doing it? This is a sort of a 9-minute song. Did it just sort of evolve? That's where we were always headed.
I know it's probably no mystery that as young creative musician studio types, we indulged in certain practices, and we thought, well, this would be interesting for someone who likes to maybe partake in
making peanut butter sandwiches.
That maybe this song would be long enough to prepare it, to enjoy it, and finish it in one listening. So the song ended up being about 9.5 minutes or so.
Right.
Add in your own material there.
Who knew?
But hey, what I loved about it, because as it was. I can't really remember the sequence of when this was recorded. I think it was kind of in the middle of the album, that once we got a real good relationship going and you got a real good groove going, we both share a love of horror, mystery, all things space. Like we just love, anything unknown is great for us. And we love the campiness of Lucifer and all this craziness.
Yeah, I would find for myself, it's not a primal thing, but it's the interesting thing about me sort of recording with you, that it was never sort of my main toolbox, sort of going into sort of that sort of Lucifer, Alice Cooper type of fare, stuff like that. But I think with the sort of space motif and stuff like that, I think working with you and sort of in some sort of subconscious way is just sort of to bring you into help sort of making those like about Lucifer and that sort of genre was sort of trying to bring you into my song with me, and it's a part that I if you weren't there, I don't think I would have gone there.
That's something. When Jeremy jumps off the table twice, he's saying, "Tell me more."
I don't think I would have gone there in that song about Lucifer or whatever I was thinking back then, if it weren't for you and just sort of what you enjoyed. And I definitely remember it was just sort of an attempt to sort of keep you in the...
What I liked about it is in an album of indulgence, this song was so indulgent, because we knew we had a kind of blueprint of how long. But from there, for me, it's funny how each person in the studio, whether it's your song or I'm working, we each have our own idea of how it's going and where it came from and all. Say, my love of old horror movies. When I was young, I wanted to be a vampire. That was my big thing. I loved it. My father had a funeral home, so go figure. I had a morbid curiosity right off the start. But jump forward to recording Lucifer. For me, it allowed me to explore all these kind of campy horror tropes, and the sound effects. And I always envisioned us doing a video of it where it's like a goth 60s kind of early heavy metal. Well, you're going to hear it. So, but it's so loaded with symbolism and weird happenstance in the studio. I mean, continue on. I don't want to.
Well, I look forward to hearing it. The only thing I would say is this is part of the thrill about doing this album, is that nobody was telling us what to do. In fact, we just were sort of following our nose, and we wanted to do whatever was cool to us and whatever we wanted, and we were just sort of figuring it out between the two of us. So I think, just talking about it now, I don't know anybody that would allow, or if you went sort of into that record company thing, which was very sort of set in stone and stuff like that, anybody allow you to do a song like this? The fact that I don't think that ever arose to us. It was like we just wanted to do what we thought was cool stuff, and I think there's a beauty and into that, just sort of listening or about you talking about it. We just followed our noses.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's so obese of a song to discuss, break down, and describe, like, why am I hearing these things? Like, I'm just trying to imagine myself hearing it for the first time. Again, such an enormous, ambitious song with such limited gear, because all of these sound modules, were pretty low end. At the time, they were fine for a project studio, but now you hear the limitations of all the stuff. But you can imagine what we imagined it to be. I don't even know what to say.
I'm excited to play it. I haven't heard it.
Should we just do it? Should we just play it and try to explain it after?
That'd be good. I'd like to hear the whole thing. How long of the song is it, by the way?
Well, I think it's about 9 minutes.
Is it? Well, I'd like to hear the whole thing.
It's kind of your Bohemian Rhapsody.
Go make a peanut butter sandwich while we're playing this.
That's true.
Go for it.
We don't anymore. We're old men, but here we go.
Smooth or crunchy.
Lucifer's Lament.
I look forward to listening to this.
above suits on. Moonbeams slink across the spooky space. Stardust interstellar loops and the Milky Way. I'm miles from home, a light years from the cosmic suns, miles away, floating to my Xanadu. I'm so high. So I spread my wings, I'm flying. Godspeed, the end has come, I've done my dying. I'm on my own, I'm on my way to better worlds all alone. Drifting through the universe, I've gone oh yeah. Spiders and flies, a lizard disguise of a miracle. Grand of the calm, the mood and the brown. It's so clinical, we are dying. My curtain call, I play the devil's trill. Sweet dreams, a lullaby, the night I read.
crazy long-haired hippie stuff.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Lucifer's Lament. There is a ton going on there.
So there's a ton going on. It was interesting to hear. It does sound like a ton going on in places. However, the sort of element of the song, the tune itself, if you strip out all that stuff, is quite a fun little tune to play on acoustic guitar. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful little tune. And I think lyrically it's got some little standout things that I enjoy listening to.
Well, we are now, the people watching this will have read along with it, so you can obviously see where his mind is for this song lyrically, painting a lot of spatial weirdness pictures.
Yeah, moonbeams slink across the spooky space, stardust, interstellar loops, and the Milky Way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that sort of floating amongst the stars. I'm miles from home. Mm-hmm. I'm light years from the chosen one. Yeah, it's got a nice terpsichore, the lyrics. But I think specifically why I picked this song was because I just sort of the guitar. Yeah, like one of the interesting things that I find about this song, and one of the things that I love, it's sort of like open tuning or whatever like that, but I love the fact that it's got a couple of drone notes. So it's got the E's and B's sort of going through it all. Mm-hmm. And that was the interesting thing to me because it's just So it's pardon me. Yeah, it's all that. Yeah, I wish I could play it better. I haven't played it in a long time. So it's all that stuff based on an E and B. So. Floating to my Xanadu. I'm so high. Yeah, so it's got a beautiful tune, which sounds really nice on the acoustic guitar. But I think musically it was sort of that E and B stuff that we could sort of base the whole song on. So there's a lot of drone stuff sort of floating through that.
And what I loved about it as a heavy guitar player was this. It was like an F sharp major with the open E and B. Really go. Something like that. We all die.
Yeah.
We all die. Thank you.
So, the thing that I hear listening to that, at least musically, it's also got it's got a great little string part too. So, like I hear that, and I think that would be like playing live in a planetarium with an orchestra, and like I could totally see like it'd be such a fun song to do because it's sort of a rockin' song. To do so, yeah. That's my sort of when I hear that song. That's I can think of that. Now I've updated this song. It's on my new album, and the only thing I would say listening to this song now, knowing what I know now. So the title Lucifer's Lament, to me right now, it's a bit of a trope. I heard a few musical tropes in here, and I say that as sort of so musically, it's sort of a simple way of sort of getting through a song to me. Like it's not well thought out. There's a couple of parts where there's that ascending, where the music sort of like ascends.
Well, I was gonna say I wrote down some notes here that I'd like to ask you.
But I'm listening. It sounds like it's just like a day in the life. It's just like the swirling strings.
Well, I think that's exactly what your intention was in those, what we call the rise parts.
Yeah, crazy. I'm listening to it now, and I listening to it now. I can certainly pick it out. I don't know why I would do that because it seems so obvious to me now listening to those.
Well, to me, it's a weird bridge because there's 3 times the rise happens. The first time is introduce the guitars.
Yeah.
Second time is introduce the chorus. The third time is the end of the chorus, right? At the end of the chorus to lead back into the sound effects. So it's a very convenient
It is,
tool.
and I'm sort of surprised that it's so dominant in there that I would put that in. Yeah, so that's part of a musical thing, is trying to come out of one section and fly into another. It's always sort of a compositional sort of, if you're arranging stuff, how to get from one section to the other, whether you do it musically or however you sort of put it together. Yeah, so to me, I'm listening to that and I'm thinking, well, I took the easy way out on those musically.
And conversely, I would say it's magnificent because the demon voice, we would picture a voice,
Yeah.
we're summoning Lucifer. You know, hey, folks, we're not really Satanists. We just find that stuff really funny and cool and campy, and so we're going to make fun of it, like stick a shiv in it to a certain extent. But the rise, to me, was ideal to hammer home that joke.
Right, so you have these two competing factions. So if we did everything in a bubble and we never were exposed to anything outside, like these ascending things would just sound fine. So like, because I'm listening to it now and I think, oh, that's just incredibly a day in the life sort of a trope or whatever like that. But in its own sort of scope, downstairs in the basement while we were doing it, it probably seemed like at the time the thing to do, the cool thing to do,
Yeah.
and it made all the sense in the world. So it's an interesting sort of musical thing that you're sort of the context and stuff like that.
I also love the bit of mystery too. You know, we're older now, we're more mature, but back then I was hoping people would hear that and go, "What are those guys doing down there? It's something weird." Like, I like that thought, you know,
Yeah.
that mystery of what's going on in there.
It probably had more effect that if you were upstairs,
Right.
if you were up in your kitchen with the closed door to the basement, hearing these sounds coming out of the door, and maybe if we had some dry ice that we could sort of going into the kitchen upstairs, that would sort of freak people.
We
out.
would have went for that.
Yeah, would have freaked out and stuff like that. So,
And you know, it all comes back down to, it seemed like with his art, we were entertaining ourselves more than anybody. You know, for his whole career, he's been doing these great things and then putting them in the closet going, hee hee.
yeah, I listened to the chorus, and I remember sort of struck the Grand Kubla Khan from Buddha to Brahms. I remember doing that. And
Kind of mystical.
yeah, I remember sort of struggling with that. I remember
Struggling with what?
it's sort of the lyrics, sort of
That part? Or the
yeah,
whole thing?
yeah, that part, the temperament. I mean, the space lyrics were very easy for me to do. I remember, but I remember the chorus. Me wanting to do something with you that you would sort of enjoy, and sort of trying to grab these sort of phrases, the Grand Kubla Khan from Buddha to Brahms and the paramystical and stuff like that. I don't think I would write something today like that back then. I don't think I would use the phrase Lucifer's Lament. I think I would think about it a lot more, and it's to me another easy trope. But at the time, I guess it was all very cool.
You never say the words Lucifer's Lament, and what you do say at the very beginning is, "So you want to dine with Beelzebub? Soup's on."
Yeah. So it was. I guess.
Beelzebub. I remember you going on about Beelzebub for a good day or so.
Okay, so maybe then I discovered a new word but that's me trying to find something. So it's the song that you hear, "I Love You," which has been done a billion times. So it's trying to find a different way to do it. So how many millions of times you hear the song about the devil and stuff like that? Well, not as many times as you hear "I Love You" or "I Love You, Devil."
I devilishly love
I
you.
devilishly evil woman. But yeah, so it sounds a bit of a trope to me. But other than that,
You want me to just go through a couple of notes here and get your thoughts here?
sure.
All right.
Oh, the backwards guitar, I remember. The fact that we sat
We always
there.
got to squeeze in backwards guitar somewhere.
But I remember specifically we had to put backwards guitar in this song.
Well, if it was only one song,
it
would be
was
this one.
saying, because if it wasn't in, I think anybody that would be listening to this would be going, "Where's the backwards guitar?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?"
I'm just about to spark
Yes.
this up. Where's the back?
I'm just about to eat my peanut butter sandwich.
That's
Crunchy or smoothie.
But no, that wasn't obvious. And of course, working with the 38, in its glorious imperfections, studio guys, we have to take the wheels off the tape, spin them around, and go backwards. And so we didn't want to have to go through that too many times. So we would pretty well take the first pass on the electric guitar. I'm pretty sure I played it.
You did, but what you did play is an experience I had with you that will live with me for my mortal hours, was when we played this guitar part, and we did an acoustic. And I always remember that day that we had 2 acoustics, and we had strung one of the guitars as a high-strung guitar. So like a 12-string guitar, and so you got the 6 normal strings, and then you got the high strings for a 12 string. So we just put the high strings on one of the guitars.
It was an old studio trick that myself and my old studio partner John Dewar used to use, because it was a Nashville trick, high-strung guitars. You buy a set of 12 strings, you split them up to the regular set and the high-strung, and you string up your second acoustic guitar with only the high-strung guitars. It's called Angel's Hair. It sounds incredible.
Yeah, and I remember it sounded beautiful when we recorded, because I remember you had a beautiful old Neumann microphone or something in the middle of the room, and we were just sitting, staring at each other, and it was a long song to play or whatever, because I don't think we were punching in or out, and I think yeah, we did it live in the studio. I always remember that.
It's funny. I was telling Byron today with a couple of the guitars here, I'm going to restring one as a high strung, because if you haven't tried it, try it, because it'll blow your mind as a guitar player. I know for a guy like Byron, I think I brought it to you, this idea of a high strung, and then he wrote 30 songs, because it just opens up a whole new thing, without having to learn the new tunings. Like you've just got a different set of voices.
Yeah, it's like putting a capo on your guitar, and you just get a different sound on your guitar, and it might
even better, because it's open strung.
Absolutely,
like that,
But it's a different sort of sound in your head that might inspire you to do something otherwise that you wouldn't have done.
And just to move on, so we can move on, I'm going to just go over a couple of sound effects, because as you can hear at the beginning, one thing I remember you saying is that you wanted to start and an end to this, and that you hear the gong. We use this, again, it's probably a sample somewhere we had, but the gong starts and ends the song. There's a couple other sound effects.
Was there any reason for the gong? Why we picked a gong?
I think it was just to put a period at the end of the song, because there was so much goofy stuff, the seagulls and the weird flutes, I don't even know what those flutes were, but
so if you're hearing flutes, it's probably me hearing old Mellotron sounds. So
yes,
that was a big 60s thing, all those fluty things that you hear sort of out of whack comes from all those Mellotrons that the Pink Floyd and the Beatles and the
Right.
and stuff like that. So that's where you get all those sounds.
Off the top, there was a couple of things that were interesting. I'm not sure exactly where this one came from, but 2 samples that we took that were very surreptitious to the ending of the song. The marching band in the Indian music.
There was a marching band or something like that?
Well, it was the drums.
Did that come from the television or something like that?
Yeah, it was like just... This song was weird because, just weird things would happen in the studio. 2 the most weird happenstance things were the marching band, that it just worked so well in that part at the beginning. You can hear the pump, the drum corps. But most specifically for me, this was one of my little experiences.
Right.
In the middle of doing this song, and you were saying, I want another weird thing. And we both love Indian music, the drones, the tablas, all that weird Eastern music stuff. So I get up one Saturday morning, and in my jammies, I throw on the TV, and it was a French channel that came on. I don't know. I probably was watching Blue Nuit the night before. Anyways, but what comes up on the TV is this Eastern, like, or Indian droning band playing, and I'm listening to it going, oh my God, I think that's the same key. And so I run and get the DA-30, hook it up to the TV, and I record about a minute of this Indian drone. And you showed up later in the day, and I said, well, I got this, and we dropped it in. It was in the perfect key, the perfect style, the grind, exactly and it blew our minds that it fit so perfectly.
Sure, that was I remember that, and that was sort of a wonderful event that just confirmed about what you can do with the technology that was given to you at that point in time. So anything really that was in your space you could use, and it was I remember such a freeing feeling knowing that anything or any way you wanted to do it, the tools were there. I think maybe 5 years previous, 10 years previous, those things were just sort of afterthoughts. I mean, you have to actually go get like a record of sound effects and put the record on and go through the record. You couldn't really take things out of the air and stuff like that. And yeah, I think I remember being very excited by that just because of what we discovered, and just sort of the very act of doing it was very exciting. Yeah, it was just like the laboratory was completely opening up.
The Indulgence Laboratory.
The Indulgence Laboratory, absolutely, like the Wank Fest, yeah, and for better or for worse, but yeah, it was very exciting, and it was fun. It was very indulgent. Yeah, talk about two happy people for getting to do it.
What was always so nice too is that Byron was so accommodating. He knew he had so much stuff that whenever I brought in something that I felt like trying, he was usually pretty good with allowing me to do it. The one thing I heard in that chorus was I just let myself go on John Bonham drum beat. The kick and the snare interplay there. It's funny that we did have to slide in a cowbell. That clonk, tink, ka-tunk, clank. I enjoyed that. That was nice, the drum beat in the chorus there.
I know it gets sort of a bad rap, the cowbell, but for many good rock songs, it's just another. To me, it's a worthy. It's like making a cake, as worthy as having drums in a song or a bass or a B3 organ. A cowbell just adds to the beat, and it's been used so much in rock and roll, and it's too bad it gets such a shit kicking. But yeah, it's when you don't have the cowbell, your ears go
silly. At
some point of the song, you're thinking, this needs a cowbell.
Well, I think to what you and I always loved too was the I call them the clank chords. Clank, clank, clank. So if it's a cowbell, like I always say, my favorite Beatles song is Getting Better. Yeah. And it's always been from the clank, clank,
right.
clank.
Yeah,
clank.
Very sort of simple on the one, stuff like that.
And the other thing I want to mention was funny how we didn't own a tambourine. So all the tambourine parts you hear in all these songs are the R8, me doing this with the R8.
Is it like there's no live, hardly any live percussion? I wouldn't bring my own tambourine over.
I think maybe we did once or twice, but then we always went back because we were still really hooked on syncing. And,
and the whole
the tamborine's a little off. But now we'd say, well, fuck, it's supposed to be a little off. Yeah. That's the idea of a tambourine.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Today would never put it would always be a live tambourine and stuff like that. Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. Sometimes those R8 sounds were just cut off because I was just adding everything. We heard the tablas in there. Like I had all kinds of little cards, world ethnic drums, and.
Well, it's interesting because you and I are working on a new song that I did, and I the song that
this became
no the new song that you found by
Dunno, I call it.
Yeah. It's called, and it was done about 5 years ago. But it's got a tambourine part, and I heard it, and I hear it in the song now, and I can tell I did it on the first take. It's kind of there's parts where I'm just sort of I'm not on the beat or whatever like that, but I can tell that I've learned that it doesn't make a fucking difference. Sorry, it doesn't make a difference because once you start singing behind it. the tambourine's shake 99% of
It's
the
like a
tambourines.
brush.
Yeah, yeah.
It's mushing over all the notes.
Yeah, and it starts making it a couple parts is kind of a bit off, or I throw it on the ground. I heard at one point of the song that we're doing. So yeah, it's very much so. I would never do a tambourine today like that. I can hear it today in the stuff that I do.
Well, we're much more accepting of little mistakes. I think that's really what makes music though, the little mistakes, because all the combinations of chords have been taken. You know?
For sure. And so like the foundation right now is I still use a click track. So right now all my drums are loops and stuff like that. So it's a lot easier just to use a very sort of straight foundation, and then you just get to do your own blah blah stuff.
And before we move on to where the song is morphed into, there's a couple of things. You know, I hear the laugh track in there. That's really good. I just think that was you making a joke at people laughing at yourself, because it was always a big issue back then.
I love the laugh track. I watch old cartoons that have laugh tracks in them still today. Like the Flintstones has got a laugh track in it, and it just kills me. There's something about laughter. And I did a song this year where I put a bit of laughter on it and stuff like that. I think everybody should have, in their own waking hours, that should be the app that they should have on their smartphones. If you're going to be walking around with a smartphone, you should have a laugh track. At least when you're cracking a joke to somebody at the bus stop.
Yeah, like I have my phone ring is crickets. I mean, if it isn't crickets, it's a laugh track.
Yeah.
Crickets goes everywhere.
Right, and it's a weird thing, it's sort of these laugh tracks, because I still watch the Flintstones or other older shows maybe that have laugh tracks and stuff like that. Laugh track works. Laugh track, as soon as you hear the laughing, you're in, even though you know it's been recorded and stuff like that, you're like right into it and stuff like that.
Being a space freak, I did, not a fan much anymore, but the Big Bang Theory. And you go online and you see them where they've taken the laugh tracks off, and it's a little awkward. You know?
Yeah, I agree. Nothing brings, or one parts of my life brings me more happiness than listening to people laugh, especially just where they can't breathe anymore and stuff like that. Like it's infectious, and I especially listening to some stuff on YouTube and stuff like that. You played it to me last week, the worst interview ever. And the guy is trying.
You must know this interview from the German talk show in like the 70s or something, where the guy's interviewing these people that have had horrific surgical mistakes made, and has affected them. This guy speaks with a very high voice, and the host breaks up, and he can't regain it, and it's cringy.
Yeah, he's got a giggle fest, but you can't help but laugh too and stuff like that. Well, all those shred videos that you showed me, I see you're laughing just thinking about them.
Look up Beach Boys shred.
Yeah, and you can play it on a loop, and I'd be on it. You'd probably have to phone the ambulance at some point. I'd need oxygen, because something about laughing and giggling and stuff like that for sure. So it was good to make.
This song was truly the kitchen sink song for you on this album.
The whole album was the kitchen sink, but there was even my friend at the time, his kid was born, and you can hear a baby at the end, and he gave me his the cassette of his kid that was like still in the hospital crying, and so we were just using. I'm surprised that I can't. Is there the kitchen sink on there? Like, did we actually put a kitchen sink sound on there? Or you doing the dishes or
what
something?
He did do is bring me the cassette of this child. He's crying or going, ah. But in his twisted mind, he was going to take it, and we did. We recorded it on the 4 sections of the S10, and so it went from whatever's the lowest note up to the highest note in that little section, and I believe that it was kind of your homage to 2001 or something. It's this demon voice that turns into a child crying. It's, the space and time. That's what I get.
I'll go with that. You're giving me way too much credit. It was, it would be like a mental burp as far as I'm concerned. It was just cool to do I don't think there was any highfalutin thinking behind it or anything like that.
I wanted to also make note, I'm sure everybody else heard, was that awesome bass line on it. It's interesting that we brought out this. Byron and I were just talking about our matching Japanese vintage Squier guitars. I have a really nice 1982 Salmon P bass Squier, but it's Japanese vintage 1982, beautiful. Byron has a 1984 Butterscotch Telly, and they come from the same basic factory in Japan that got yanked out of the Fender manufacturers. I think they were making two good guitars.
Still got it.
But I think this bass was on a bunch of the album, but you also had your own weird little bass, or did you use John James?
I don't know. I've never been partial to many. I started listening to this, I played guitar for quite a long time, but I always find that bass was always the most comfortable instrument for me. And bass was something that I never had a problem. No matter whose bass or what bass I was playing, it never was an issue to me at all. I actually found it kind of curious that when I did my next album, sometimes just to get somebody else in, they would get like a bass player to play and stuff like that. And by the mid-90s, bass players would come in, and it was always just trying to get like a different voice on, but bass players would come in with, what was the variance? So there'd be like a 5-string bass with a low B, but then they started having like, 6-string basses or 8-string, like piano, and everybody's.
Well, you get a stick eventually. It's 10 strings and it's bass.
Right? Yeah. The stick and and a couple of the bass players, they came in and they're all playing up here, sounding like guitars and ducks and stuff like that. And I always loved just the simple sort of 4-string bass. And when I first started to learn to play bass in high school, I learned the big stand-up bass. And
I was wondering how you could play that.
I remember bowing and stuff like that in the orchestra, and how tough it was on your fingers and the calluses that you would create. But it even got into a crazier zone, is that when we would play Dixieland and stuff like that, and the bass would have to be plucked. And I remember playing, and there was a girl a year older that was in the music department. She played bass too. And I remember all the blood that was all over the bass, because your fingers would just fall apart while especially if you're playing Dixieland, which is really crazy.
And it's fretless.
Too. Unforgiving. Good way to learn about your tuning and stuff like that.
Good way to give up.
It's something that I never, but it was a good foundation. And so as I grew older and started playing electric basses, I never had, all basses sounded the same to me and stuff like that. I love playing bass. I always love playing bass. Even to this day, it's my favorite part of putting a song together, is playing the bass part. Only because, for better or for worse, I don't want to practice. I don't practice my bass parts. I just loop the song, and like within sort of 3 tries, I've usually found the foundation of my bass part. And I love that sort of that time. It's a very intense time trying to find your bass part when you've looped the song sort of 3 times. But I can always find stuff, and I just love going through the fretboard and finding stuff that fits. Things that, especially playing pop songs. And there was a time, and I know McCartney found the same thing when he was doing the song off of Rubber Soul, Michelle. And it's that point in time where you're playing the bass on a pop song, and instead of going to the root note all the time, you start playing your bass in inversions of the song, and the way a song just opens up when you're playing bass and you play off of the root and stuff like that, just sends tingles up my spine.
That's what I'm always saying, because I love fractured chords, because they're not telling the whole story. Now you can add a note to that fractured chord and make it a horror, or make it
right
a beautiful love story. It's all those intervals, the extra note where it goes, and that's where bass comes in. So
you're laying like a seventh, like there's a bit of you're always looking for the resolution, right? So it's like you're hearing notes that are off, and you're waiting for the resolution to come at some point in time. You can hear it in your head. And that's why the bass is so fun. And that's why this song was so fun, because again, it's a drone thing. So you got E's and B's sort of floating in the ether of the song. So you can sit there for days and just play off that. And you can play Twinkled Stars on your bass, or you can just imagine the cosmos and playing different planets and how they would sound. Whether Jupiter would be the low E or the stars.
Well, at the end of that song, you can hear, I love the part where at some point I know the end is truly coming, because you go up a little higher and then it's just descending all the way down till you hit that.
Yes.
Weird, I think it's a B somewhere that's a weird bone.
Too bad I didn't have a five. Sorry. Too bad I didn't have a 5-string bass.
Oh yeah, too bad. God, that's all you need.
Yeah, that's
In fact, bass players. You don't
You
need
can
another
hear
string.
myself. You can hear myself complaining on the track that
I was going to say,
there's
like, it's interesting because you fit into that category of the songwriter-singer who is also primarily the bass player. You know, like I look at McCartney, I look at Sting, guys like that. I'm wondering, they seem to approach their bass parts a little different because it is their song and they're more compositionally oriented than, like, do you consider yourself a bass player or a...
No, for the longest time, I never considered myself a bass player. I never even considered myself a guitarist. The band I was in when I was first starting out, I played guitar. My buddy played bass, and that's just the way it was. I could never play a solo for the longest time. And I would still argue whether I could still play one today. But yeah, it was always sort of guitar. I was more into learning the chords, sort of the foundations of pop. I think actually, even today, it'd be fun. I always say, like, the one thing I don't have in my place is a piano. I'd love to learn sort of piano or get more involved in piano than I do right now. But fundamentally, I was always sort of consider myself a guitarist, but I don't think I was ever happy playing guitar. I think I'm most at home for sure playing the bass. And I don't really think much about how I'm going to play the bass. I just know once I get the song playing in my head, it's just waiting to be played. And yeah, it's such a thrill to still play bass today. I love getting the groove, and I love and it's so fun now to record bass because I'm technically not good enough to play through a whole song, but I'm good enough to find a few good spots in the song where it sounds really good, and you can just sort of grab those parts. And
it's interesting, you know, from going in a situation where I was playing in a band, we played quite a lot, and you're just used to playing 3.5, 4 hours a night, like 40 songs, you know, whenever you play. You know, to now to where I'm really, you know, I'm playing part-time. I play every day, but it's very short bits. And when someone asks me to play a song, I always go, whew, that's like 4 minutes of playing straight. Yeah. Well, and I'm not used to that anymore.
I think that's one of the great things about recording, at least for a guy like me, that I enjoy. That I don't want to play 4 minutes. I just want to just sort of find that part where it just sort of fits in. But you know, bass playing is slightly when I think about what things influence me. So certainly the Beatles and Mr. McCartney influenced me, but a lot of the music that I play today is music from the early 70s, and it's all funk. It's all stuff like
Earth, Wind and Fire.
Earth, Wind and Fire, a lot of Stevie Wonder, George Clinton, what's the Sly and the Family Stone, all these funk masters and stuff like that, and I still listen to this day. It still makes me dance in the car, and I start listening more to the bass parts and stuff like that. It was a big influence still today. So whoever those great, who was the big band? It was the Johnson Brothers, I think. Strawberry.
Brothers Johnson.
Yeah, Brothers Johnson and stuff like that, and they had the real funk stuff going, and that was a big thing in the 80s, 70s, and I remember sort of learning when in high school, learning how to sort of slap. Never could do it.
Well, like
really.
Berdine White was a bass player.
Yeah, yeah.
Wind and Fire, and he was like one of the original slapper guys.
Yeah, and sort of in the as growing up listening to all the Pistorius and Pino Palladino and all the, so they even got into the fretless mode and stuff like that.
I was aware of those guys, but you know, when they're the jazz guys that are just shredding.
Yeah, so it started to lose.
hear-
It started to lose its sort of thing. So it's guys that just sort of the funk masters in the early '70s that just laid on the beat and just sort of played within that realm. Not these guys, sort of in the '80s, I guess, and it's true that were shredding and were starting to move up the neck. Yeah,
I'm just not good enough to appreciate some like the jazz guys that were so good. Yeah, I know they're good. I play an instrument I can appreciate. But to sit back and listen to it, I'd rather listen to we will call it the oobly doobly bass. Oobly doob boom.
yeah.
Bubbly bass.
Yeah, so listening to the bass, and as I grow older, learning more about like the Wrecking Crew from LA, the Carol Kay, was that her name that played the bass like Pet Sounds and stuff like that, where they doubled up, you know, where they used very interesting to hear all that stuff.
Godmother of bass. There's an article in the paper today about her. Was depicted in that show, Mrs. Maisel or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
She was depicted as kind of a chick that can play the bass, and she wasn't very happy about it. Apparently, no one approached her. The character wasn't called Carol Kay, but it was obviously her, and she had big boobs, and she was saying, you know, that really wasn't the way it was.
Yeah, and to be known for that, outstanding bass parts from that side of the world and stuff like that. So I always was a guitarist, but I think now it's easy for me to say I'm most happy playing bass.
And for me, viewing Byron doing his art over the years, I always, you know, when you hang out with your buddy, I knew he was never excited about any of the instruments he played. They were all just basically tools to get his message out. You know, you wouldn't practice anything. He wouldn't try to get better at the instrument. He would just find a way to finagle the track to sound the way he wants, and he could play. But I don't think that was your
No, it was
reason for being.
It was never my shtick, and I would say that for a lot of instruments and stuff like that. I just learned, and even today using the computer and stuff like that, is knowing enough to get what I want out onto tape or display. So that goes with keyboards that I do. So I do keyboards now, but I'll slow the song down to half speed so I can play piano and stuff like that. Because I can't play it at normal speed, and just sort of hacking my way through all that stuff. But that's half the joy about it, eh? Just sort of look at you.
I had erroneously mentioned that we were going to move on to the reworking of this song, you know, in the present day, but I think Byron preferred that we just actually spend an episode on it because it's an interesting transition from Lucifer's Lament to what it became today, and it might give you a little more insight into his creative process.
Yeah, absolutely. An updated version of this song. And talking about sort of the end of this album, the fact that you guys are sort of hearing about this album, I finished the album and it never got released.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of funny. We'll touch on it next week, but at the end of Bite Down Hard, you know, I think for any of you creators out there, whatever you do, you're a painter, you're a musician, whatever it is that you do, I think the true joy in the art is the production of it. And when you're finished, you know, it's such a letdown in a way, you know, because you enjoyed the process so much. You're going, I need to do that again, you know, or I'm sad. It's like reading a novel. You want to get to the end, but when you get to the end, you go, now what?
I think so, very much so. So I think I was learning what makes me the most happiest, and this is the first time I went through that process. And I think it was when I got to the end of this album, it was becoming self-evident to me where I should be and where I wanted to be doing in my life. And I don't think playing live or being in a band or rehearsing relentlessly over the same songs again and again. I think at that time it was starting to become very clear to me where I had to sort of go. So that's one of the talks of it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we finished it. Yeah, and it's just a quick little addendum that when we finished it, my friend John and I were at a bit of a split at this point. And he had gone off in his own way. Now, he's a studio genius in his own right. And even though I didn't have the best relationship at the time, and I loved doing your stuff with you, I realized that you already had a bucket load of new stuff to go. And I remember suggesting you should probably go see John, because he's the guy that can really help you at this point, because he had a lot of really talented friends, he had a lot of great gear. And that was just where you should have been at that time.
Yeah, well, this is where we can end this, but that's certainly